Rain drizzled down the cafe windows that night, blurring the city lights into soft watercolor streaks. Inside, Amelia sat alone at her table, her apron still dusted with flour from the bakery where she worked all day. She wasn't supposed to be here, she had only stopped by to rest before picking up her son from a neighbor's place. But fate has a strange way of arranging moments. At the table across from her, a tall man in an expensive suit sat rigid, jaw clenched, clearly enduring the most disastrous blind date imaginable. She watched as the woman opposite him laughed loudly, barely letting him speak, scrolling through her phone, uninterested. He looked trapped, lost, and oddly vulnerable for someone who looked like he belonged on the cover of a business magazine. Amelia noticed the way he kept glancing at the door, as if silently begging for an escape. She could have ignored it, after all, she had her own problems, but something about his expression tugged at her. Maybe it was because she knew what it felt like to be stuck in situations you couldn't control. When the woman suddenly got up, muttering about leaving since he was boring, Amelia felt his shoulders sag in quiet defeat. Without thinking twice, she stood, grabbed her coat, and walked over with a gentle smile. "Hey," she said softly, as if they'd known each other forever, "sorry I'm late." His eyes widened in shock, then gratitude, as he quickly played along. The relief on his face was almost heartbreaking as he stood and pulled out the chair for her. The rude date scoffed, muttered something about pathetic men, and stormed out, leaving the two of them in awkward silence. Amelia chuckled nervously, brushing her hair behind her ear, unsure if she'd overstepped. But the man, his name, she later learned, was Daniel, just laughed, a sound rich with gratitude. "I owe you one," he said, his deep voice carrying exhaustion hidden beneath charm. "I think you just saved my night." She shrugged, embarrassed, and admitted she had seen enough to know he needed rescuing. Somehow, what began as a moment of kindness turned into a spark neither of them had expected. Daniel wasn't used to feeling this kind of ease around someone. For years, he had been surrounded by people who saw only his wealth, his power, his name. But this woman, simple clothes, tired eyes, and a warm smile, treated him like a person, not a CEO. He leaned in, curious about her, asking where she worked, what she liked, and why she looked so exhausted. Amelia laughed, embarrassed, and admitted she was a single mom raising her 6-year-old son while working 2 jobs. Life hadn't been kind, but she was determined to give her boy a future. For the first time in a long while, Daniel found himself listening not out of politeness but out of genuine interest. Amelia didn't know why she was sharing so much with a stranger. Maybe it was his eyes, tired, lonely, but kind, that made her feel safe. She talked about her son, Liam, and how he was the brightest part of her life. She talked about the nights she stayed up worrying about bills, about how she had once dreamed of studying architecture but had let it go when life became about survival. Daniel listened silently, but his heart clenched with each word. He knew loneliness too, though in a different way. He had money, power, and an empire, but at the end of every day, he returned to an empty penthouse with no one waiting for him. The hours slipped away unnoticed, and by the time Amelia realized, it was late. She stood quickly, apologizing, saying she needed to get home to her son. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest at the thought of her walking away. "Can I walk you out?" he asked, and though hesitant, she agreed. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the street glistened. Under the streetlights, they walked side by side, their steps matching as if they had done this many times before. Amelia felt strangely comfortable, though a voice in her head reminded her not to get attached. She couldn't afford heartbreak, her son came first. But Daniel's presence lingered in her thoughts long after they parted ways. The next day, Daniel found himself unable to focus in meetings. His mind replayed Amelia's laughter, her resilience, and the way she spoke of her son with pride. He had met countless women before, women who wanted his attention for what he could give them. But Amelia hadn't asked for a thing. She hadn't even known who he was. That thought alone made his heart race in a way he hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, Amelia scolded herself for thinking of him at all. She was just a single mom. He was probably some office worker she'd never see again. Life didn't hand her fairy tales, and she wasn't foolish enough to hope. Fate, however, had other plans. 2 weeks later, Amelia was running late for her bakery shift when a sleek black car pulled up beside her. She froze when the window rolled down to reveal Daniel, looking sharp but smiling warmly. "Need a ride?" he asked playfully. She laughed in disbelief, shaking her head. "What are you doing here?" He admitted sheepishly that he had been hoping to run into her again, and when he couldn't, he decided to take a chance. Against her better judgment, she accepted. For the first time in years, Amelia felt butterflies in her stomach, a reminder that she was more than just a mother struggling to survive. As weeks turned into months, Daniel and Amelia grew closer. He visited the bakery often, sometimes just for coffee, sometimes just to talk. Slowly, he became part of her world, helping Liam with homework, joining them at the park, even learning to bake cookies though he made a mess of it. Amelia tried to resist, reminding herself that their lives were too different, but Daniel kept showing her he wasn't just a CEO. He was a man who wanted to belong, who craved love as much as she did. For Liam, he became the father figure he had always longed for, patient and kind. For Amelia, he became the hope she had buried deep within her heart. Still, the truth loomed like a shadow between them. Amelia had no idea who Daniel really was. He had never lied, but he had never revealed the extent of his identity either. He feared that once she knew, she would pull away, believing he was too far out of her reach. But secrets have a way of surfacing. One evening, Amelia walked into the bakery to find a magazine left on the counter, Daniel's face staring back at her under the headline, "The Reclusive Billionaire CEO." Her heart sank as the truth hit her like a storm. She felt betrayed, foolish, and heartbroken all at once. When Daniel arrived that evening, excited to see her, he was met with cold silence. Amelia stood with the magazine in her trembling hands, tears brimming in her eyes. "All this time," she whispered, "you let me believe you were just ordinary." Daniel's heart broke as he reached for her, trying to explain. "I didn't want you to see me for what I have. I wanted you to see me for who I am." But Amelia pulled away, shaking her head. She had been burned before by empty promises, and this felt like a cruel joke. She asked him to leave, unable to risk her fragile world being shattered again. Days turned into weeks, and both of them suffered in silence. Daniel buried himself in work, but nothing dulled the ache of losing her. Amelia, meanwhile, tried to focus on Liam, but the absence of Daniel's laughter in their little home was a wound that wouldn't heal. Liam, wise beyond his years, noticed his mother's sadness. One night, he placed his small hand on hers and whispered, "Mom, he made us happy. Doesn't that mean something?" His words cut straight to her heart. Maybe she had been too afraid, too quick to push him away. But how could she be sure he wasn't just another man who would leave? Daniel couldn't stay away forever. One stormy evening, he stood outside the bakery, soaked but determined, waiting for Amelia to close up. She almost ignored him, but the sight of him, drenched, shivering, but holding her favorite flowers, softened her resolve. "I don't want your money," she said before he could speak. "I don't need saving." Daniel's voice trembled as he replied, "I know. But I need you. I need both of you. Not because I'm lonely, not because I'm powerful, but because you make me feel alive. And I'm terrified of losing that." For the first time, Amelia saw not the CEO but the man, broken and sincere. Her walls crumbled as she listened. All her life, she had been strong for her son, refusing to depend on anyone. But maybe strength wasn't about standing alone, it was about knowing when to let love in. Slowly, she stepped forward, placing her hand in his. "I don't want promises," she whispered, "I just want honesty." His eyes glistened as he nodded, pulling her into his arms as if he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. The rain poured around them, but in that embrace, they found warmth that no storm could steal. For the first time, Amelia let herself hope again. Their love wasn't a fairy tale, it was messy, complicated, and full of scars. But it was real. Daniel didn't sweep her into a life of luxury, instead, he stepped into hers, learning the struggles, facing the fears, and walking beside her through every storm. For Liam, he became more than a father figure, he became family. And for Amelia, he became proof that sometimes love finds you in the most unexpected places, like a bad blind date and a rainy cafe. Their story wasn't about wealth or status, it was about two lonely souls finding each other when they needed it most. In the years that followed, Amelia never stopped working at the bakery. Daniel often teased her, asking why she didn't let him buy her the world. She always smiled and said, "Because I already have it." Her world wasn't money or mansions, it was the laughter of her son, the warmth of Daniel's arms, and the peace of knowing she was finally loved for who she was. Daniel, too, found a new purpose. He wasn't just a CEO anymore, he was a father, a partner, and a man finally at home in his own heart. Together, they built not an empire, but a family. And so, the story that began with a simple act of kindness grew into something neither of them could have imagined. Amelia had walked into a cafe as a tired, struggling single mom, never expecting her life to change. Daniel had walked in as a lonely CEO, trapped in a world of empty connections. They left that cafe not knowing that destiny had already woven their hearts together. Through pain, fear, and doubt, they chose to fight for love, proving that sometimes the most unexpected moments lead to the most beautiful endings. Their story was a reminder to anyone listening. Love doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for courage. In the end, Amelia's life didn't suddenly become easy. Bills still came, days were still exhausting, and challenges didn't disappear. But everything felt lighter with Daniel beside her. For once, she wasn't carrying the weight alone. For Daniel, boardrooms and billion-dollar deals no longer defined his worth. Love did. And when people asked them how they had met, they would smile at each other, remembering that night in the cafe. A night where a poor single mom decided to save a stranger from a bad blind date, not knowing she was also saving herself. And in doing so, she had unknowingly walked straight into the heart of the man who had been waiting for her all along. Theirs was not just a love story, it was a story of second chances, of choosing vulnerability over fear, and of realizing that even in the darkest seasons, love has a way of finding its way through. Amelia and Daniel proved that true love isn't about status, money, or appearances. It's about two broken people choosing to heal together, to build something greater than themselves. And as they stood years later, hand in hand, watching Liam graduate, they knew the truth. That rainy night had been the beginning of everything. The night two lonely hearts finally found home. The years had been kind to them, but life always had a way of testing even the strongest bonds. Amelia's bakery was thriving now, thanks to her hard work and Daniel's quiet support, though he never once used his power to interfere. She insisted on building it with her own hands, and he respected that. Liam had grown into a curious, bright teenager who adored Daniel as much as he adored his mother. Yet, beneath the laughter and comfort of their little family, a storm was brewing, one Amelia never saw coming. Success had made her more confident, but it also made her a target for envy. One evening, as Amelia closed up the bakery, she noticed a stranger lingering by the door. His sharp eyes scanned the shop with something between contempt and curiosity. He introduced himself as Victor, a man who claimed to be opening a chain of luxury cafes nearby. Amelia felt a knot tighten in her stomach, there was something unnerving about the way he looked at her. Later that night, when she told Daniel, his face darkened. He knew the name. Victor was a ruthless businessman who had clashed with him before. He didn't just compete, he destroyed. And now, his sights were set on Amelia's dream. The weeks that followed were brutal. Victor's cafes popped up across the city, offering flashy menus, discounts, and aggressive advertising. Customers began to waver, and Amelia's once busy bakery saw quieter days. She tried to stay strong, smiling at Liam and reassuring Daniel, but inside, she was breaking. She had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and now it all felt like it was slipping away. Daniel urged her to let him intervene, to use his influence to crush Victor, but Amelia refused. "If I let you fight my battles," she said softly, "then it stops being my dream." Her stubbornness both inspired and worried him. Daniel, torn between respecting her independence and protecting her, decided to take a different path. Instead of using his power, he used his presence. He began helping at the bakery, wearing an apron, serving coffee, and greeting customers with a smile. Word spread quickly, people whispered about the mysterious man working alongside Amelia. Some recognized him, but he never confirmed who he was. For the first time, Amelia saw Daniel humbled in her world, not as a CEO, but as her partner, shoulder to shoulder in the fight. And slowly, customers began to return, not just for the bread, but for the warmth of what the bakery represented. Victor didn't take kindly to failure. One night, Amelia received a threatening letter slipped under her door, warning her to shut down before things got ugly. Fear coursed through her, but she refused to let Liam see it. She tried to hide the letter from Daniel, but he found it. Rage consumed him, and for the first time, Amelia saw the sharp, dangerous edge of the man who ran empires. He crossed the line, Daniel said coldly. She grabbed his hand, trembling. Promise me you won't fight hate with hate. Promise me we won't lose who we are. Daniel looked at her, his anger softening at her plea, and nodded. Together, they came up with a new plan. Instead of competing with Victor's luxury and glamour, Amelia leaned into what made her bakery unique, heart. She began hosting community nights, where local musicians played, and children decorated cookies. She offered free bread to the homeless on Fridays, refusing to let greed dictate her choices. Daniel used his connections quietly, inviting influential figures to experience the bakery without ever revealing Amelia's story was tied to him. Soon, the place was buzzing again, not because it was flashy, but because it felt like home. Victor's cafes, though beautiful, felt cold in comparison. But Victor wasn't done. One afternoon, Amelia walked in to find her bakery vandalized, windows shattered, walls spray painted with cruel words. She collapsed in tears, overwhelmed by the cruelty. Daniel held her as she sobbed, his heart breaking. Liam, now older, placed his arms around both of them. "Mom," he said fiercely, "we'll rebuild. Together." His determination reignited her spirit. The next day, the community showed up, customers, neighbors, even strangers, helping to clean and repair the bakery. Watching everyone work hand in hand, Amelia realized something powerful: she wasn't alone anymore. This wasn't just her dream, it belonged to everyone who believed in her. Victor, seeing his intimidation fail, tried one last tactic. He confronted Daniel directly, mocking him for lowering himself to play house with a single mom. But Daniel didn't flinch. With calm strength, he told Victor the truth that cut deeper than any threat: she has more than you'll ever have, love, loyalty, and purpose. You can't buy that, no matter how much money you throw around. Victor sneered, but deep down, he knew he had already lost. His empire was built on fear, while Amelia's was built on love. And love, as Daniel had learned, was indestructible. In the end, Amelia's bakery not only survived but flourished. She expanded, not because of Daniel's money, but because people trusted her. They saw her fight with grace, honesty, and courage. Liam grew up witnessing the strength of his mother and the devotion of the man who had chosen them both. Daniel, once a lonely CEO, had discovered a life far richer than any boardroom could offer. And Amelia, once a struggling single mom, had found not only success but a love that made her believe in miracles again. Years later, as Amelia stood at the counter watching Daniel teach a group of children how to knead dough, she smiled through tears. Their journey had been full of storms, but every storm had led them here, to a place of laughter, resilience, and home. She whispered to herself, "That night in the cafe saved us both." And as Daniel caught her gaze from across the room, his smile told her he was thinking the exact same thing. Would you like me to continue this into a part 3 where Liam becomes the center of the story, facing his own challenges as an adult, while Amelia and Daniel guide him with the lessons of love and resilience they lived through?